The rules. Contained within this document are the rules of this game server and community. These rules are subject to an administrator's discretion and will be upheld to the full extent and power of their duty. If an administrator believes you have broken a rule or acted inappropriately, you will be expected to discuss the incident with the administrator, and you will also be expected to justify your actions. If you are unable to appropriately and effectively justify yourself when requested, an appropriate form of punishment will be enacted. Ignorance in any form of the rules detailed within this document will not be accepted as a reasonable reason for any violation of these rules. The idea of this game and the purpose and intention of these rules is to create real life to an enjoyable extent. The rules are specifically designed to ensure that players act realistically. With this in mind, any attempts to exploit loopholes within the rules will not be tolerated. Terminology. Roleplay RP. When playing on the game server, you must act realistically, which means that you roleplay as a character in the game. The terms OOC and IC refer to out of character and in character, respectively. When speaking about things that are not relating to your character, it is deemed as OOC, and you should be done so using OOC channels, e.g. using the /OOC function in chat. Administrator. An administrator is a member of staff who holds the rank of enforcer, moderator, senior moderator, administrator, senior administrator, head administrator, or owner. City employee. Any person who is not a citizen and receives a paycheck from the city for carrying out their duty. Government employee. A city employee who is not a taxi driver or a courier. Raid. Trespassing on or successfully breaking into an occupied property with the intention of stealing from it or its occupants or killing the players inside. Occupied property. Any property which players are presently inside of, defending whilst the raid is in progress. Section 1. Basic Conduct Rules. All users within the community are expected to adhere and are subject to the following rules of conduct. These rules will be enforced at all times, including instances where a user is communicating with someone who is not part of this community. In-character gameplay is not subject to basic conduct rules, with the exception of any rules explicitly stated to apply during in-character gameplay. 1.1. Disrespectful behavior. Disrespectful behavior in its broadest sense is not acceptable. Users are expected to conduct themselves respectfully at all times. 1.2. 1.2. Discrimination. Any form of discrimination, including but not limited to racism, homophobia, transphobia, xenophobia, and discrimination based on sexual orientation or gender identity, is strictly prohibited in all contexts, whether in character or out of character. Additionally, players may not knowingly use details of another player's personal life or identity to discriminate against them. If a player is uncomfortable with the use of discriminatory language, they may request it stop in LOOC chat or a report. All players involved must respect this. 1.3. Slander. Slander will not be tolerated within this community. The only time where accusations can be made against other members of the community are within the in-game report menu, the action request and staff complaints forum on the website, or when speaking to another member of staff. 1.4. Causing problems. Any attempts made by the players to cause problems within any community platform will not be tolerated. 1.5. Personal details and identity. Players may not leak, attempt to gain, or maliciously use private and personal details of another player. Details including, but not limited to, passwords to accounts, home addresses, personal photos, and phone numbers of either other members of the community or their family, friends, etc. These details must be respected and not shared throughout the community in the game, the forums, PerpHeads TS3, the PerpHeads Discord, or Steam chat. Players may also not pretend to be another member of the community beyond in character names in an attempt to damage their reputation. 1.6 Cooperation with staff. Players must cooperate and follow any instructions or requests given to them by staff members in relation to in-character community-related situations. If a staff member requests information about an incident, users must respond honestly and without omission. PerpHeads uses an automatic demo recording feature, which is not to be disabled or tampered with at any time. Recordings will be available in Garry's Mod demos, Garry's Mod/demos, if a staff member requests a demo file and that demo file was recorded within the last 21 days, you are obligated to upload it, i.e. users may safely delete demos which are older than 21 days. It is the user's responsibility to ensure there is enough disk space on the drive that Garry's Mod is installed on to ensure the demos record. Staff members must give users a minimum of 24 hours to allow the users to find specific evidence needed for the situation. 1.7 Out of character names. While connected to the server, players are prohibited from using inflammatory, discriminative, inappropriate, or offensive usernames, or anything that would otherwise violate basic conduct rules. Section 2 General Conduct Rules. 2.1 Play realistically. This game mode aims to emulate real life, and as such players are expected to play realistically at all times. Exceptions can be made where appropriate. Any such exceptions are purely determined by an administrator's discretion. 2.2 Voice Chat. The in-game voice chat may not be used for anything other than to allow for verbal conversation. Where voice chat is of an unacceptably low quality, the offending player should immediately cease its use. Voice chat may only be used for OOC communication if it does not affect any roleplay situations or is used within administrative situations. 2.3 Bugs and glitches. The abuse and or exploitation of a bug/glitch will not be tolerated. Any player who experiences and or who is aware of a bug glitch must report it, even to an administrator or on the forums. In addition to this, players may not abuse the safe zone at the casino if they are at risk of harm from other players. 2.4 Exchanging in-game item funds for real funds. In-game items and benefits such as invitations to organizations may not be sold/traded for real/virtual items and or currency or vice versa. However, players may offer to donate on behalf of another player in exchange for in-game money only. 2.5 Excessive negativity. Players may not excessively impact the experience of others in a negative manner, unless the actions of a proportionate escalation of negative actions that may have performed against the original player. Additionally, players have a 2-hour window to seek revenge on another player. They are provided they are unaware that the target has died and started a new life. When participating in raids, players carrying visible weaponry whilst entering, exiting, or inside the property that is being raided are considered to be significant enough threats to be killed justifiably without prior verbal commands or interaction. For example, it is not acceptable to intentionally mug and target new players, destroy valuable items due to basic distaste such as product prices, killing a player over verbal insults, minor or accidental actions, killing a player after mugging them because they've seen your identity, cause unnecessary damage to a stolen vehicle without good reason, use explosives or incendiaries without taking precautions to ensure that the uninvolved player's items are not damaged, use Molotov cocktails in raids without prior negative interactions which would justify their use, Scam or deceive other players to dishonestly acquire their rare/seasonal items or the money for them. Scam new players for their items or money. 2.6. Report and rule breaker. It is believed that another player has broken a rule. The report function F6 key on your keyboard is expected to be used to inform an administrator. If a player is in a roleplay situation with another player who has broken a rule, after the report function F6 key has been used, the former player should continue the roleplay situation. Oh my god, I messed up. Has been used. The former players should continue the roleplay situation as best as their ability within the confines of the rules until either it has ended and/or an administrator intervenes. Players may also use report function if they require administrative assistance in general, for example, being stuck somewhere. Additionally, the F6 report function should be used to report individuals who are conspiring to break rules, i.e. mass RDM. When reporting another player, please make sure you include the names of anyone involved and which rules they broke, exactly what happened when the events took place. 2.7. Required sounds. When playing on the game server, players must be able to hear in-game sounds, including other players' microphones. Players do not have to use a microphone to play on this game server. 2.8. Sexual roleplay. In order to help preserve gameplay, sexual acts of any kind may not be performed, offered/suggested, or imitated. It is not allowed to display pornographic content of any sorts on TVs. 2.9. Text chat. Players must only use the available chat functions for their intended purpose. These are outlined in the chat commands page on the help website. For example, when using the /advert function, players must use it realistically and for the advertising purposes only. Players may not at any time attempt to bypass the OOC message limit. Organization chat is to be treated like a phone application, and as such, players should be aware that other players would see them interacting it. Panic binds may not be used in organization chat. 2.10. Advertisements and images. The /advert function, rentable billboards, and image frames are expected to adhere to certain standards. Adverts are to be formatted realistically, akin to ads found in newspapers or news headlines, used for advertising businesses, broadcasting news, or buying and selling items or services. Images and billboards must be used realistically and display content that would feasibly be shown on a sign, poster, or billboard. Here is a list of guidelines for images and billboards, including but not limited to following: no inappropriate content or content that violates basic conduct rules, no sexually suggestive content, no low effort images, no unedited in-game screenshots that contain HUDs, names, etc., no distorted, overly cropped or zoomed images. What is considered to be acceptable image/advert is subject to staff discretion. Additionally, players may not use other players' images without permission when taking inspiration from another player's concept. However, concept players are expected to create their own images to suit their needs. Free. General in-character rules. 3.1. In-character names. In-character names must be realistic, relatively common, and the names of famous individuals may not be used. The decision as to whether or not a name is deemed to be inappropriate is subject to an administrator's discretion. Please try and keep names semi-realistic to the gender of your character. Being called Tyler J as a man is very unrealistic, as it is a girl's name. 3.2 Third-party communication applications. Any and all forms of communication about any topic which affects in-character decisions must be conducted through in-character methods, for example through the use of in-game voice chat. The use of communication applications outside the game is strictly forbidden. For example, the use of Steam Chat, TeamSpeak, Discord, Skype, telephones, etc. 3.3 Realistic actions. All actions a player makes must be done realistically as possible, especially during combat. For example, when jumping up to or down from somewhere, it must be done slowly, carefully, and without resulting in injury to the player. Furthermore, players should take great care whilst climbing. Players should not attempt to boost people onto buildings or structures, nor should they climb onto objects which realistically would not hold their weight or use elevated defenses. 3.4 Putting your life at risk. Any actions taken by a player that that may put their in-character life, freedom from imprisonment, or general well-being at risk must be done so in a realistic fashion and for beneficial reasons. This is specifically relevant to the violation of any in-character law, meaning that murders, thefts, etc. are all expected to be conducted realistically. A few common examples of unreasonable risks include, but are not limited to, running on the highway without a justifiable reason, loitering around the vicinity of a shootout you are not a part of, or being within the line of fire from both intentional and accidental fire. Users must flee the scene of a shootout and wait for police to clear the scene, reopen the area to the public. This applies to regardless if you're being restrained or not. Murdering a police officer to avoid yourself or being receiving a minor punishment such as a small ticket or a minor jail sentence. Loitering around the scene of crime you committed with the intention of engaging in more combat. Do not comply with reasonable orders given under the direct threat of a lethal weapon pointed at you, such as mugging. Committing a violent or serious crime such as murder, theft, arson, etc., whilst knowing that police are in direct eyeshot of the scene you wish to commit the crime at. After committing a crime, relevant precautions should be taken to avoid arrest or police detention, such as avoiding public places. Some valid reasons to kill a police officer include risk of long prison sentence, typically 7 years or more, preventing the imminent detection of drug production, committing a violent crime police would reasonably use lethal force to apprehend you for. 3.5 New Life Rule. When a player has died in character and after they have respawned, they must wait at least 5 minutes, a countdown is provided, before they may either return the place where they died and or interact with the situation. They must also treat their respawn as a new life. A system is in place to inform players they have breached this rule. Any attempt to bypass the system will not be tolerated. Joining or leaving any government job is to be treated as a new life. While waiting for an NLR time to run out, players should not wait in the vicinity of the NLR zone, should stay away a reasonable distance away. When a player is given a new life, they must forget / may not act upon any and all details of their previous life. This includes properties and cars that they own, government positions that they hold in any friends or acquaintance that they have had made. Players should not use or act upon any information gained from the other players which is relevant to their previous death while the NLR timer is active. 3.6 Stay alive. Players must at all times do everything in their power to prevent and or avoid their own death. 3.7 Properties. When properties used to block entrances to a property, at least 2 entrances to any main area of the property must be left unobstructed. The main area of a property is defined as any area within the property where a significant portion of occupants reside and main functions of the property are carried out. A path is considered obstructed when a player has to either jump or crouch to travel along the path. 3.8 Elaborate construction. Props may not be used to elaborate direct player's movements. For example, through the creation of a maze, typically a player's movement is considered unrestricted if at least two players can fit through the path traveling side by side, and they don't need to jump or crouch in order to travel the path. The construction of any elevated platforms is prohibited in the base defense. In addition, players may not build a construction that allows near one-way visibility. Additionally, players may not place an excessive amount of props designed to make movement more elaborate when defending against explosives. 3.9 Placing props. Props may only be placed within properties that you own, or if you have any permission to do so from the respective owner. This excludes the use of government-issued police barricades and cones. Defense props may only be placed within the confines of buildings contained within owned properties. Props may also be placed in public areas as long as they are benefiting roleplay and are not obstructing anything. Under no circumstances should the defense props other than metal detectors be placed in public or government buildings. Props must be placed realistically. For the placement of a prop to be deemed realistic, it must demonstrate it can remain in its position without being frozen through the use of the physics gun. A maximum of 3 spotlights may be concentrated on a particular area. Additionally, the construction props may not be placed to erect defenses during the ongoing shootouts or raids, nor can players use the phys gun to edit their base during this time. Click here to access the construction booklet, which provides further guidance on base building. The base must have 2 people to fit in all gaps. The only props to be placed on top of barricades are spotlights. The only props to be placed in front or behind the barricades are fences and bookshelves. You can not stack metal detectors or fences. The prop should be physically supported at all times. You must not create defenses near a full one-way visibility. This includes head glitches. You may only have three spotlights pointing at one area. Spotlights next to each other should have at least shoulder to shoulder width. When shooting between 2 props in a defender's full head and upper torso should be visible. The entire width of defender's head and torso must be size of the gap. You cannot stack barricades on top of each other. You can only place defense props within the confines of buildings you own or access to. This only applies to base constructions. You cannot use any of sign as a part as a base defense. 3.10 Realistic construction. Player-made constructions must be built realistically. For a construction to be deemed realistic, it must demonstrate that it can obey the laws of physics to a satisfactory extent, and if applicable, not harm the structural integrity of the building it is placed within. If done in a realistic fashion, exceptions can be made. 3.11 Leveraging pushing. Props may not be used to move players, other props, and or vehicles. Props may also not be used to hold other props unrealistically. For example, stopping a car from rolling down a hill by freezing a prop in front of it. 3.12 Mayoral assassination. The mayor may only be assassinated if it sufficiently benefits the player involved, or if the mayor has negatively affected the players in a severe personal way. Where possible, players should attempt to directly convince the mayor to improve the city, manage city management, or change the tax policy before attempting an assassination. Please note that any assassination of the mayor is very likely to be looked into in depth and treated more strictly, meaning that players must have a good reason for such actions. Examples of reason to justifiably assassinate the mayor include, but are not limited to, failing to adhere to promises regarding city management and tax policy, discriminatory conduct towards diverse group of people, any instance in which it would be justifiable to kill another player according to Rule 2.5, implementing a combination of detrimental policies that directly harm players' interests. 3.13 Selling items. When selling items through the use of a cash register, using misleading item names is not allowed. Item names must accurately represent what is being sold, including containers and the contents within them. Using vague terms such as a mystery box similar is not acceptable. Additionally, items may only be put on sale within properties that are owned by the player, or within properties where the player has direct permission to do so from the owner or the respective property. 3.14 Prank calling. Excessive prank calling is not allowed and a valid RP reason must be represented. For example, diverting cop from a location where criminals activities are happening. 3.15 Vehicle damage. Players must avoid damaging the vehicle they are currently driving to the best of their ability, and make a constant effort to avoid colliding with other cars, walls, or other entities. This also applies if the car in question is stolen or work related. Players who commit an action that is likely to cause damage to the vehicle must have a valid reason to do so that outweighs the risk associated. For example, fleeing a life-threatening danger or running someone over in defense of yourself or someone else are justified reasons to collide with objects that otherwise damage the car. Ramming cars out of the parking lot space solely to claim a parking space is also prohibited. 3.16 Idle. Players who go idle for a prolonged amount of time in the server may be automatically kicked at a higher play count. Players are prohibited from going idle during roleplay or administrative situations. However, if they have a reasonable explanation, they may go idle providing they inform players involved via LOC and submit a report to inform an admin they had gone idle. 3.17 Idling on a job. Players are not allowed to go idle for any period of time while performing a job. Players should quit their job before going idle or use /report to inform a member of staff they have gone idle. 3.18 Storage in trunks. While their life and or freedom is in imminent danger, a player must not use the storage boxes, trunks, ATMs, to avoid losing valuable items or money that the player is currently holding on their person. This also includes detaching weapon attachments with the intention of avoiding the loss. 3.19 Evasion. When players are evading arrest, they must do so realistically. For example, if a player evades arrest by initiating a police pursuit, they must demonstrate to an administrator that he had a reasonable chance of escaping. Players must not use the monorail if they are being directly pursued by the police. In addition, players may not needlessly escalate police pursuits into shootouts. Changing, joining, or leaving jobs to avoid interaction or pursuits with another player is also prohibited. Exploiting peaceful zones to hide from pursuing players is also not permitted. 3.20 Disconnecting from the server. When disconnecting from the server, players must ensure that they are not part of any roleplay or administrative situations. This includes, but is not limited to, being unconscious. Players should also wait at least 10 minutes prior leaving the server after committing a crime. This does not apply to the crime has been resolved. Player has been arrested/caught for this crime. It is also prohibited for a player to disconnect from the server with the sole intention of saving possessions. However, if a player can provide a reasonable explanation for disconnecting during roleplay, they should do so by informing a staff member with the use of a /report function. 3.21 Non-player characters, NPCs. When role-playing within the vicinity of NPCs, for example, the NPC that resides within Freddy's Bakery, the City Hall, etc., the NPCs must be treated as regular players and taken into consideration within roleplay situations. Simply killing the NPC usually isn't sufficient. For example, if a player is involved in a bank robbery and is visiting the hospital to receive treatment from the NPC, the aforementioned player should ensure his and the NPC's lives are not in immediate danger. 3.22 Highway driving. Players should at all times drive on the correct side of the road and should not perform unrealistic maneuvers while driving along the highway. For example, performing a U-turn or driving down the wrong off-ramp. In addition, Traffic laws must be obeyed while at the intersection. This includes stopping at red lights. However, if the player can provide a reasonable justification for their actions, they may be excused from punishment. For example, a player may run a red light at an intersection if doing so will significantly increase their chance of survival. Three point 3.23 Placing drugs. Players may not place drugs in areas that are not accessible without jumping or crouching, unless they are transporting the drugs in a timely manner. In addition, drugs may also not be placed within any public building or in bazaar/business shops. 3.24 Players are prohibited from bringing out-of-character information into in-character gameplay. Out-of-character information is defined as any information that would not be realistically accessible to your character. Common examples include discussing server rules during roleplay situations, viewing illegal substances through walls or objects, discussing ongoing in-character situations in out-of-character chat, using video clips in character without taking proper measures, e.g. using the phone with a /me, except when used in supervisor situations to address misconduct. The exception to this rule allows you to talk about OOC related things when it does not affect anyone around you or anyone openly involved in a roleplay situation. For example, when inside of your base in a private area. 3.25 Drug harvesting/mugging. Players may not harvest drugs or mug players whilst being raided, or when they suspect they are about to get raided if they don't have a significant chance to escape the situation. For example, if you know you can escape, you may do so with the drugs, although you will have to drop what you have harvested if you're caught by the police/raiders. 3.26 /me function. The /me function may only be used to perform actions that cannot be effectively depicted within the game mode. The /me function has to be used in a realistic fashion. For example, performing a /me on more than one person at a time, or performing multiple actions with the same /me would be deemed unrealistic. When the /me function is used to affect another player, the other player may wish to resist the action by using the /roll function, provided it is unrealistically possible to do so. The same restrictions apply to the /desk function, which can only be used to truthfully describe events that have occurred. 3.27 Prolonged detainment. If a player has been illegally detained against their will for more than 10 minutes, they should use the /report function to inform an administrator. An administrator should then arrive, let the player know that they are there, and observe the situation. It will then be down to the administrator's discretion whether or not the situation has lasted for an unreasonable amount of time. 3.28 Being tied/gagged. When a player has been gagged in some form by another player, the former player can only be ungagged with the use of the /me function by any player who is not tied up. Players should refer to Rule 3.27 if they have been restrained for an excessive amount of time and they are not a part of any active roleplay situation. Players may not use the /me function to tie up players. Instead, they must use the craftable zip ties items to tie up other players. 3.29 Recognizing players. Players may recognize or describe another player if they have seen a reasonable amount of their face. This generally depends on when a player has had a chance to see the other player's facial features. Typically, this is based on if a player can remember another player's in-game in-character name. The player that appears above their head, so that the players can be recognized even after changing their clothing. Players cannot have their facial features or names cannot alter their facial features or name while actively pursued by others, including situations involving police warrants. 3.30 Confiscation. No weapons or evidence shall be confiscated by law enforcement when immediate harm is at risk. such as under gunfire or assailants nearby. Evidence is permitted to be confiscated if the officer is unable to watch over the evidence and leaving it where it is would risk it being tampered with by a member of the public. LEOs also may not be confiscated. Any evidence when highly outnumbered or very likely to lose an ongoing situation. This also includes officers impounding vehicles. 3.31. All transactions relating to items or money must take place entirely in character and on the server. Agreements to perform a transaction may be made on external websites such as the Internet section of the forums, but the full transaction must take place in character and follow the in-character rules. Examples of off-server websites not allowed to be supported: loans, gambling, prepayment item orders, deposit systems. Informal agreements made between friends can exist out of character, off the server or across multiple lives. However, this is done at their own risk and the transactions are not enforceable by staff team. Examples of this include lending a friend some money, providing payment for crafting materials. 4. City employee rules. 4.1. Follow the law. Government employees must at all times follow the entirety of the law. 4.2. Paramedics. Typically, paramedics may not enter a crime scene if it has not yet been secured by law enforcement personnel. Paramedics cannot at any time patrol the city, but may park at places such as the fire department, police stations, hospital, other sensible non-crowded areas, and wait to be called out. This excludes paramedics using the first responder vehicle if they are using it they may patrol. Paramedics must inform police officers if they have treated wounds which have been inflicted as a result of a crime, for example gunshot wounds. 4.3. Firefighters. Typically, firefighters may not enter a crime scene if it has not yet been secured by a law enforcement personnel. Firefighters using a patrol vehicle, e.g. Dodge Ram or Land Rover, can patrol the city, but must call the fire truck when responding to large uncontrolled fires. Firefighters use the fire truck may not leave the fire department unless responding to an emergency services report that includes details of an uncontrolled fire or medical emergency. 4.4. Road crew workers. Ordinarily, road crew workers should refrain from entering a crime scene until it has been properly secured by law enforcement. To impound or clamp a vehicle, the road crew worker must receive authorization from a law enforcement or road management officer, unless the vehicle is abandoned and obstructing the natural flow of traffic. Road crew workers must inform law enforcement personnel if they have repaired a vehicle that was damaged as a result of a crime. Road crew workers may charge a fee of up to 500 for each repairing, unbooting, or unimpounding a vehicle. 4.5. The Mayor. The Mayor may not add to, remove from, and modify the Parallel Penal Code. In addition to this, the Mayor may not stay in the police department or casino for an extended period of time when hiding from the prospective danger. Mayors are expected to do so realistically and in sensible locations. 4.6. Secret Service agents. Secret Service agents must, to the best of their ability, do everything possible to protect the life and general well-being of the Mayor. Secret Service agents are not there to obey the Mayor, but must do their best to accommodate the Mayor's lifestyle and requests, where it is possible and reasonable to do so. However, Secret Service agents may give orders to the Mayor during emergencies and times of crisis where it is appropriate to do so. 4.7. Police Dispatcher. Police Dispatcher must remain within the appropriate area of the PD at all times. Dispatch room. In order to become a police dispatcher, users must have and utilize their microphone. 4.8. Taxi driver and courier. Taxi drivers and couriers must carry out their duties to the best of their ability at all times. Taxi drivers and couriers must follow sections 6.8 and 11, 6, 8, and 11 of the Paralake Penal Code at all times. Players may not attempt to exploit their abilities as a taxi driver or courier for personal gain at any times. 5. Criminal activity rules. 5.1. Mugging. Players are not allowed to mug more than 3 times in any 60-minute period. Nor can they mug the same player twice within any 6-minute period. Players may only mug other players in a realistic manner. For example, mugging someone in the middle of a street is not realistic. Mugging should only take place in locations which are out of the view of the public. Players may not be forced to move out of public view under gunpoint prior to the mugging. For the duration in which the bazaar shop doors are removed, mugging will be temporarily disallowed in the back rooms. Whilst participating in a mugging, all players are expected to adhere to Rule 2.5. This means that causing any unnecessary unreasonable harm or damage to a player or their possessions is prohibited. Items such as barricades, furniture, crafting materials, and planter boxes, and rare seasonal items are to not be dropped during the mugging. 5.2. Forced withdrawals. In order to preserve gameplay, players must not attempt to force other players to withdraw funds from an ATM/transfer funds from the mobile banking application from their phone. In addition, players may not force other players to withdraw items from their storage boxes/trunks unless they are lawfully searching a storage container under Section 3 of the Paralake Penal Code. The other exemption is that players may force others to withdraw money or items when their belongings have been stolen, damaged, destroyed due to another player's actions or negligence taken via scamming or loan to by the player who refused to return the belongings. 5.3. Raiding. Civilians may not raid or assist in raiding an occupied property more than twice in a 60-minute period, and cannot raid same property more than once within the 60-minute period. Civilians who die whilst raiding or defending must wait 1 hour after respawning before attempting to raid or assist in raiding the same property, and may not return to the situation until it has finished. Only 2 bombs, timed or remote, are allowed per raid. This does not include grenades. If a neighbouring property attempts to defend against pirates' raids, it can be raided without counting as an additional raid. This rule does not apply to raids on public buildings or the mayor's residence safe house. 5.4. City employees. Under most circumstances, paramedics may not be killed. The exceptions to this rule the medic has failed to follow reasonable orders given under gunpoint. You may not kill medics who are attempting to preserve their life. Players may not attempt to take and/or demand money or items from a city employee. The rule excludes job-related items, e.g. police radio. 5.5. Robbing the bank. Players are only allowed to assist in the bank robbery if they have joined the bank robbery by texting the NPC. They must be outside the vault when the drill is placed and must not travel too far away from the bank before the vault is opened. Any player who is removed from the bank robbery must no longer assist in the robbery and must flee the scene. Hostages may not be taken before, during, or after a bank robbery. Police may not force players who are arrested after the bank robbery is successful to forfeit the cash given by them by the bank robbery NPC. 5.6. Kidnapping. Players may only kidnap another player if it's absolutely necessary and benefits the player to such an extent that it outweighs the risks. For example, if taking a hostage will increase the chances of players escaping police sustainability, then a hostage can be taken. Players should refer to Rule 3.4 when deciding whether or not taking a hostage is appropriate and/or beneficial. Kidnapping another player whilst visible from outside a muggable zone with the intention of mugging or raiding them is not allowed. 5.7. Organization relationships. There are certain restrictions in places when it comes to relationships within organizations. Players within rival relations with another organization are not permitted to cooperate in any criminal activity with the rival organization. These activities include, but are not limited to, assisting one another in raids, basing with one another, partaking in legal activities with another. These restrictions do not apply to the organizations with neutral or allied relationships. 6.6 Miscellaneous rules. 6.1 Server crashes / restarts. In the event of a server crash or restart, the players and props will return to their previous locations. Players should not continue any previous roleplay situations unless agreed upon by everyone involved. Players should not engage in any criminal activity, nor may officers attempt to pursue, detain, or arrest any prior suspects until 5 minutes have passed since the server restart. 6.2 Third-party tools. The use of any third-party software, macro, script, or content that provides an advantage over other players is strictly prohibited and will not be tolerated. The only exceptions are third-party crosshairs and custom weapon textures, provided textures are installed in PH Custom Textures folder. You can learn about this by referring to this resource. 6.3 Alt accounts. Players may only use one account to play the server. The use of additional or alternate accounts is strictly prohibited. This is the end. This is Timmy, and thank you for listening.